Hello, welcome to the Expired Show. I'm Bella,
And I'm Dante. Welcome.
and I like the way you brushed your hair tonight,
Oh, thank
Dante.
you very much. Yes, I
You're
had it
welcome.
cut.
You had it what?
I had it cut.
Oh, you had it cut.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really? Oh, well, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
I need to cut my hair. Too long, way too long. Okay, so we will be discussing the world's most prolific serial killer.
The world's worst, most prolific serial killer. This is going to be interesting.
The world's most prolific serial killer.
Ah, so it wasn't Jack
Is
Ripper after all. Revelation, people.
There are hundreds of serial killers worse than Jack the Ripper. Okay, we will be discussing the monster of the Andes.
The monster of the Andes. Hmm,
Now,
interesting.
God, it's just so shocking. This that I don't even know where to begin. Okay, so what I'm gonna tell you guys is that he is believed to have killed or unalived, sorry, over 300 preteen girls between
Seriously?
the eight between yeah between 1978 to 1980.
300?
Over 300, yeah, in 2 years.
Beat that, Ted Bundy.
Hmm.
And Charles Manson as well. 300? Where the hell did he find the time to be able to do something like that?
Well, he did it over three different countries. So he committed the crimes in Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. He is
Blimey, he gets around,
considered
doesn't he?
the most prolific serial rapist and killers in history.
Wow.
So he was born Pedro Alonso Lopez, October 5th, 1948, in Tolima Department, Colombia. He was the seventh of 13 children born to a Benilda Lopez de Castañeda. She was a laundry worker.
Oh, it's always the seventh ones.
Seventh ones? What?
Yeah, the ones that are born later, the become the
Okay, so
never the firstborn.
the family formerly lived in Sardana, where his father, Midardo Reyes, he was a rancher by trade, was murdered 6 months before Lopez's birth in an ambush shooting while defending a neighboring hamlet.
Oh,
The
no.
neighboring hamlet, um, and during La Violencia period, and he was killed. Now, 6 months before Lopez is born. And Benilda, Lopez's mom, stated that Midardo was the local leader of a self protection group aligned with the Colombian Liberal Party, but accounts later on described him as a member of the Conservative Party. So Benilda subsequently fled the area for her mother's home in El Espinal, where she was bedridden out of grief over the death of her husband. And so she remained under the care of midwives until her son's birth.
Oh, really? Mm, interesting.
Now, Lopez claimed he had a very difficult childhood, full of violence and the absence of a father. He described his mother as a prostitute who was only good for putting children into this world, each from different men.
Right.
So apparently, all the 13 kids are from different guys because she, I guess, was sleeping around.
Goodness me.
Uh, Now, we don't know, like, if she really was a prostitute. I think he just meant, it's he meant that in the regard as to she was easy, but it was described here that she was a laundry worker. So it seemed like she
Right.
was a promiscuous laundry worker,
I see.
and he called her a prostitute because all the kids are from different men.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I get
But I don't know if she actually took payment for that. Okay.
you.
So
Yeah.
according to Lopez, he often saw his mom and stepdad have sex in front of him.
Sorry, say that again.
Yeah, they were doing the
Did
deed
I
in
just
front of
hear
him.
you say what I thought you just heard you say?
Yep.
What the?
Now, neighbors from his childhood stated that Lopez's mother was strict and often prevented him from playing with them.
Okay.
His mom says that her son's hatred of her manifested early on, with Lopez often telling his mother directly that he couldn't stand her while he was still a young child.
Well, that's understandable.
Mm.
I think every kid said.
According now, okay, now this is where the story kind of, we're not sure, it's like a he said she said thing.
Mm-hmm.
According to Lopez, he was banished from the house at age 8 when his mother caught him groping the chest of his sister, one of his sisters, subsequently making him homeless at the age of 8. However, his mother claimed that she never saw any abnormal behavior from him and that he just ran away from home on his own free will on April 5th, 1958, in an act of rebellion. And she has
Right.
presumed that he didn't want to live with her anymore. So I'm thinking he was probably banished from the home because what
Gee,
eight
what
year
do you
old is
think,
going to,
viewers? Do you think that he was banished from the home, or do you think that he was actually he ran away?
yeah, let us know what your thoughts are. Do you guys think he was banished from the home by his mother, or if he's lying and he actually ran away like his mother said?
Although after the things what his mother's done, I'm beginning to think that it might actually be true.
I
That's
mean,
just my gut opinion.
well, the thing is, I could see him having a very strict mom, and little kids want to run away when they have strict parents. But I could see him running away for maybe for a couple days, but not for the rest of his life being homeless.
Yeah.
I think he would prefer actually being in the home.
Yes. I'm beginning to think that myself.
And again, we're talking about serial killer, so he could be lying. He could be a compulsive liar, or maybe he's telling the truth. According to him, he was telling the truth to
Oh
authorities. But
yeah,
then
there is that
again,
possibility.
we don't really know if it's truth or if it was lies. And again,
No,
the mother isn't going to admit to throwing him out of the house at the age of 8 because she doesn't want to look like a bad mother.
nah, my
So
dad would.
she could be making up that he ran away on his own.
Yeah, but there weren't.
But anyhow,
I mean, there weren't much like social services in those days, so I don't know.
yeah, there
Maybe.
were,
Were there?
but it's different. This was in a small town in Colombia.
Mm,
Okay, so now, so he ended up becoming homeless at the age of 8, and he lived around Tolima for about a year. And during this time, he was violated by a man who had lured him to a house with a false promise of food and shelter.
oh dear.
Okay, now, regardless of what happened, Lopez relocated to Bogota at the age of 10,
Mm-hmm.
where he joined a gang of street children for protection.
Yeah.
And while he was with these street children, he began using bazuco and cannabis to get rid of the effects of hunger because they were starving, they were malnourished.
Ah,
Now,
right.
bazuco is cocaine base,
Uh,
coca paste. Okay, so
mm-hmm.
it's cocaine free base. It's a crude
Right.
extract of the coca leaf, which contains 40% to 91% cocaine free base,
Right.
along with companion coca alkaloids and varying quantities of benzoic acid, methanol, kerosene, and other extraction chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, in South America, it's known as coca paste or cocaine base. So that was right. Okay. Street cocaine is another word for it because it's very inexpensive in South America. So it's mostly used by the very poor people.
Right. Okay.
Now, he was doing these drugs to stave off his hunger. And that was, I mean, the age of 10, starting to do those kinds of drugs. That's not good for the mind either. That had
Definitely,
to have, like, kind of screwed him up too.
especially at
So,
such a young age as well.
huh?
Especially at such a young age as well.
Well, yeah, that's what I said at the age of 10.
Mm-hmm.
And now, while he was begging around the city, he was occasionally here and there sexually assaulted.
Oh,
So, it happened to him numerous times, apparently, in his childhood. Now, when he was
right.
12, though, an American family adopted him,
Mm-hmm.
but he stole that same year after he was adopted by them, he stole money from them and
Yeah.
ran away.
Ah.
Now, he claims that he ran away from them because at the school he was going to, there was a male teacher that was sexually harassing him.
Okay.
But later on, biographers suggested that no such incident occurred and that Lopez left because he felt unable to trust his adoptive family after previous negative experiences with strangers.
Well, yeah, I can understand that.
So, yeah, so he apparently ran away because he was afraid of them because he thought they were going to do to him what other people had done to him. Which, yeah, I could see because he was a little kid,
Mm-hmm.
and if people have just been violating you, you're going to think that everyone's the same.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
Yeah, it's extremely hard to trust someone after something like that.
yeah. Now let's go to the very beginning of when he started doing crimes. Well, I mean, he was he grew up on the streets. Remember?
Yeah, you did.
Now, in I don't know if he committed crimes while he was on the streets. I mean, he was begging with other children and doing drugs, but as far as if he committed any, bad crimes, anything illegal besides drug use, there's no, he never spoke about that, so there isn't any evidence of that. But in 1969, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison for auto theft. Okay, so this is the year 1969 is when his crimes start. Now, 2 days after he arrived at the prison's name was La Modelo, he was violated by four other inmates. He did not report the assault, and instead, he went on to unalive three of them with a makeshift knife over the course of 2 weeks. Hello?
Oh, yeah? Really?
Now, since the killings were described as self-defense, the prison staff agreed it was self-defense, but they still extended his sentence by 2 years. So instead of serving 7 years, he ended up serving 9 years
Mm,
for the unaliving of those three of the four inmates that violated him.
I
Now he
see.
was released in 1978, and that's when his serial killings, crime spree really began.
Right.
So after his release in 1978, he began wandering throughout the northwestern area of South America.
Yeah.
And according to him, he usually stayed in Bogota and would traverse the departments of Tolima, Huila, Caca, and Nariño to go through Ecuador, through which he would pass into Peru. People that knew him said that he claimed to work in the Llanos on the border of Venezuela, on the border to Venezuela. That's what he told people where he worked. But then again, we don't really know if it's true or not. But that's what he told his acquaintances.
That's true.
And he later claimed that between 1978 and 1980, he had killed over 100 girls. Unalived more than 100 girls, mainly
Hmm.
street children and girls from indigenous tribes. Now, one thing I want to let you guys know is that all of his victims were between the ages of 9 and 13.
Oh, goodness me.
Yes. So they were very, very young. And is it really, he really looks like he murdered more than 300 of them in between, because he says he murdered over 100 in each country, and it's three countries. But he is going to get tried in one of the countries for 110 deaths. Now, so in 1978 and 1980, he was when he was killing all these girls. So killing over 300 young girls in 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, he had to be doing this stuff almost every day
At least,
and
yeah.
not getting caught. He had very distinct features. He was
Hmm.
someone that if you saw him, you would recognize him again.
Hmm.
He was very tall. He had a very distinct nose that went off to the side. That was like crooked and very big. So his looks, he stood out because he looked different.
Right, yeah.
So it'd be easy if you saw him to say like, "Oh, that's the guy we saw take the kid," or "That's the guy who tried to take me," to identify him. Now, this is really sad because it's just sad that these children had to go through this. Okay, so while they haven't, I actually been able to find all 300 plus victims
Right,
because he
yeah.
buried them after he unalived them.
Mm,
And they're buried all scattered throughout the countryside and the Andes in Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia. So it's like virtually impossible to find the rest of his victims. He took the police to over 50 grave sites and where they found the bones, the remains of the girls, like he had claimed. And then there were some more grave sites that he took the police to where the remains were missing. Now they say the reason why the remains were missing was because animals in the wild dug up the graves and ate the bodies and took the bones. So everything was scattered everywhere.
mm,
So they weren't able to recover most of the bodies, but they recovered like 50 some and in makeshift burials.
yeah.
Okay, now It's known that he was briefly captured by indigenous Peruvians in the Ayacucho region after attempting to abduct a 9-year-old girl from her village. The Ayacuchans beat Lopez for several hours before removing his clothing and burying him up to the neck in sand.
Uh-huh.
It's most often reported that their intention was to kill Lopez through live burial,
Right, yeah.
but later on he claimed that the tribes people had poured syrup on him so ants would eat him alive.
Ew.
Yeah. However, there was an American missionary there when this was going on, when they were, burying him alive, and the American
Mm.
missionary convinced them to release Lopez and turn him over to the police. Now, when they tried to do that, the police did not detain him. Instead, the police expelled him from the country.
Ah, I see.
So the police did nothing. They said, leave the country, don't come back. Now, after his deportation from Peru, Lopez resumed his killing spree in Ecuador. And although authorities began to notice an increase of missing persons, more specifically, young girls were going missing a lot throughout the areas where he traveled,
Mm-hmm.
they concluded that the disappearances were most likely cases of human trafficking
Right.
instead of Lopez. I don't understand why they didn't take this more seriously. And they're just like basically letting him get away with it because they're like, oh, it's probably human trafficking. Let's not put him in jail. I mean, after they had witnesses that saw him try to kidnap that 9-year-old girl, and there were witnesses
Right.
that saw him do that. So how's he just being free and wondering? They should be like, okay, wait a minute. This guy tried to kidnap a girl. There's a bunch of missing girls in the area where this guy is. It's like, hello, 1 + 1 = 2.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, on May 5th, 1979, Lopez met Hortensia Garces Rosada in Ambato. It's a town, as
Mm-hmm.
she was selling newspapers. He gave the girl 100 sucres, that's the money, okay,
Yeah.
to follow him, where he then violated and unalived her under a nearby bridge.
And how
Yes,
old
sir.
was she?
She was only, I believe, she was 9.
Ugh.
Now, this is the thing. These kids, you have to understand, Latin America, which in other countries too, they do this, but especially out in the countrysides, in the small towns, little kids work and sell produce, sell flowers, sell newspapers in
Yeah.
stands. In little stands, they
Yeah.
sell things and make money. Since they're very young, they're working.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he was able to capture so many of these little girls, because if these little girls are very poor and they're working just to make, just like 50 cents in a day
Yeah.
and working all day, and he's offering them 100 sucres, that to them is like, oh my gosh, that's like $1 million. So of course
No.
they followed him, thinking like, oh, okay, well he's gonna give me like that much money. I won't have to, work for a long time, or I'll have plenty of
Mm-hmm.
money to buy food for my family, for my brothers and sisters and my parents. So it's really sad because these girls were trusting him and he was taking advantage of it. Basically, what he was doing was the same thing they did to him as a kid. What the
Mm.
guys did to him by luring him with money and promise of food and shelter is what he was doing to these girls. Now, on December 14, 1979, while he was in his hometown of El Espinal, he violated and unalived Flor Alba Sanchez. Also, there were two other unalivings of young girls on December 21st, 1979 and January 3rd, 1980.
Right.
Now, Sanchez, the one that he unalived on December 14th, 1979, was found 20 days later buried on municipal property alongside another girl, Blanca Bautista. Both
Yeah.
were bearing signs of torture. But Sanchez is the only Colombian victim for whom Lopez was tried. He claims to have killed over 100 in Colombia, but he was only tried for the one girl. So now what happened was there were other criminal cases involving Lopez, but the files were burned in a fire at the courthouse, so they got lost. I mean, no one was going to be following up with those cases because all the information, evidence was burned.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What's the luck in that? These serial killers I'm noticing are very lucky. Like the last one we were talking about in the last episode, where the jail made a mistake and set him free when he was supposed to be transferred to another prison. Like, what are the chances of these guys getting so lucky like this? Okay, so then on January 10th, 1980, he abducted Ivanova Jacome at a parking lot in Totoras, the suburb of Ambato, as she was heading for school. He violated Jacome and unalived her in a nearby shack, where her body was found at Ambatos Plaza Urbina on February 15th of 1980. So like a month and a half after, or a month and 5 days after he unalived her, her body was found. Okay, so he was frequently spotted at Plaza Urbina. He claimed to be a fellow street merchant, but he was instead usually seen frequenting market stalls staffed by young girls, offering them 100 sucre coin if they accompanied him, typically claiming he needed a city guide or he needed directions to a bus stop. So he asked these girls, "Hey, I need directions, to find the bus. Can you come help me? Or, I'm new to this city. Like, how do I get to such and such place? Can you show me?" And so the little girls were trying to be helpful and believed him and was like, "Oh, I'm going to help this guy and I'm going to get 100 sucre too." Now, it's claimed that he was often seen listening to the newspaper vendors who would read aloud the newest developments on the cases of the disappearing children, and that he would have a crooked smile, like a crooked grin, whenever he heard people talking about the missing girls. But due to his tall stature, prominent nose, oh yeah, he was missing upper front teeth and he had a large scar on his right cheek. So it was very easy to identify him in crowds. Now, in early 1980, two of the young vendors, florist Luz Marina Rosada and beverage vendor Marina Cuenca, were left alone after declining Lopez's money. But they told other merchants of Lopez's behavior, believing he might be a child trafficker. They didn't think he was like a child serial killer, but they thought, oh, maybe he's one of the people that's trafficking. So these two little girls were smart and did not go with him. And instead, they told the adults near them.
Yeah.
Okay, so thankfully, the smart little girls did not become two of his victims.
Well, that's good. They
Now, on
managed to get
March
away.
9th, huh?
That's good that they managed to get away then.
Yeah. Now, on March 9th, 1980, Lopez tried to abduct another 9-year-old, Carmen Rosada, but she screamed, so bystanders heard her screaming and he fled without the girl. So he
Ah,
took off so he wouldn't get caught. But
because she had a
Carmen
yeah.
identified Lopez because he had previously offered her sister, Luz Marina, money. So she recognized him because remember, he had a scar on his cheek, he was missing his
Yeah.
upper front teeth, he had the big nose, he was very tall.
Hmm.
So this girl recognized him as the one that previously offered her sister money, and her sister had disappeared. So basically, they knew that he was the person responsible for her disappearance.
Ah, right. See.
Now, one of the first people who reached the scene was after the girl was screaming, was the plaza's merchant board president, Carolina Roman Poveda. She ran around the market trying to get other merchants to search for the attempted kidnapper, but they were
Yeah.
ignoring her because they were busy with their businesses.
Yes.
And some thought she was being paranoid because she was just listening to all the news of these disappearing kids and she was getting paranoid about it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, she was not paranoid. She followed Lopez out of the market and caught him talking to another 9-year-old girl, claiming to be a lost visitor and offering again 100 sucres to be guided around, which the girl accepted.
Hmm.
But Roman, the president of the board, intervened as Lopez was leading the girl to a secluded path. She kept shouting that Lopez was going to sell the child and she threw herself on top of him. Now, bystanders at first were believing Lopez, who he claimed he had no idea why this woman was doing this, that she was crazy, that
Mm-hmm.
she needed to get off of him and let him go. But she insisted to the bystanders and told them no, he already tried to kidnap 2 other girls. So the crowd was convinced to bring Lopez back to the plaza, shoving and punching him along the way.
Hmm.
Now, Romans, the president's fellow merchants, were critical of her accusation and also wanted to release Lopez. They just wanted to release him. They were just like, oh, maybe she's crazy. But she demanded he be given to the authorities. So he was brought to a police station. And guess what happened after he was brought to the police station?
Let me guess. You got off on a technicality?
He was released shortly after.
Yep. Figures.
Okay, now, in April, the areas surrounding Ambato were hit by flash flooding, unearthing the remains of 4 more young girls who had been previously reported missing. As the bodies bore signs of strangulation, the police reopened their investigations, contributing towards Lopez's ultimate arrest later that same year. Now, 3 days after the flood, Lopez approached a 12-year-old Marina Roman Poveda, who was working at the Plaza Rosa market at Plaza Urbina. Lopez flirted with the girl and offered her 100 sucres to show him around the city, but she refused to go with him because he was a stranger.
Right.
So
Yeah.
she told her mother, Carolina, of what Lopez was doing to her. And when the mother looked at him, the mother recognized him and she began screaming and she grabbed him by the arm. She told bystanders that Lopez had tried to abduct her daughter and was potentially responsible for the murders of the recently discovered girls, the unalivings. Local merchants were able to overpower Lopez and hold him until the police arrived. Okay, so now again, they got him to give him to the police. Okay, and first he refused to cooperate during his interrogation, choosing to remain silent. But eventually, he began to confess his crimes to the police captain, Pastor Cordova Gudino, because the police captain posed as a fellow prisoner and shared a cell with Lopez for 27 days. So Lopez thought he was telling his cellmate about all the crimes he had committed.
Yeah.
But really, he was telling the captain of the police force. So
Ah.
he boasted to the captain that he had murdered 100 girls in Colombia, at least 110 in Ecuador, and many more in Peru. He described his modus operandi as first luring the victims away from public spaces with a trinket, money, job offer, or candy before
Yeah.
violating and strangling them with his bare hands for around 15 minutes.
Right.
Now, this
Mm.
gets really kind of because he would also do
You mean
things
it's
to their
not good
bodies after
already?
they were dead. Like
So what?
he would embrace their corpses after they died. He would hold on to their bodies and he would call them muñequitas, which means little dolls.
He was a necromantic?
Well,
Uh,
he didn't have intercourse with them after they were dead, after
right.
they were unalived. But he called them little dolls until they became cold. Then he would leave them at the scene and return later to cover them up when, I guess when nighttime came when people weren't around. And he claimed to have exhumed some of the victims' bodies from the burial sites and had tea parties with them.
Okay, we're going right into surreal area here.
Yeah, it just gets worse and worse. So when he was asked
What
about
do
his
you think he
motives for the
was?
murders,
Alice in Wonderland?
I guess, I
I think it
mean,
was the Mad
he was
Hatter and it was having a
he was
teapot.
having tea parties with their corpses. That's pretty disturbing. Now, when he was asked about his motive for the murders, he said that he lost his innocence at the age of 8, so he decided to do the same to as many girls as he could.
Right, yeah.
In a 1992 interview, Lopez admitted they killed solely for sexual pleasure, saying saying to regards why he targeted young girls, he said it's like eating chicken. Why have old chicken when you can have young chicken? Isn't that disgusting?
Mm-hmm.
He emphasized in several interviews with Colombian and American media, they found it important that the victims stay conscious until the lights in their eyes go out during strangulation, calling it a divine moment and terribly exciting.
Right.
This is pretty disturbing.
That is very disturbing.
Okay, so because police had doubts about the authenticity of his confessions, they thought he was making things up just to seem like a serial killer. I
Yeah.
don't know why someone wanted to make that stuff up, but police weren't buying his story of his confession. So
Mm-hmm.
he offered to direct them to the sites where he had left some of the victims' bodies. So in the first one, the first body he led Ambato police to were to the victims west of the city of the canyon of the Ambato River. And the family was there. The families of the victims were there when he was taking the police to their burial sites. And they said that he had a childish grin when he would point to the locations of their buried bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the first girl he pointed to was a pile of old newspapers held down by rocks beneath a bridge. Under those newspapers is where they found the body of Hortensia Garces Rosada. Then the police had to immediately lock him in the patrol car because the families wanted to lynch him for murdering all these girls. So to keep him from getting lynched, the police were protecting him now. Now, while they were driving to the second location, Lopez explained how he lured Garces away in broad daylight with several pedestrians nearby. So, in broad daylight, in front of other people, he lured this girl away, okay, and he took her to an abandoned house. And that's where he unalived her.
Ah, I see.
And he showed the police, that empty house, and they
Mm-hmm.
found the decomposing body of an unidentified girl. Now, a few days later, Lopez told police how he had met the victim in central Ambato, convinced her to accompany him out of town via a bus, and walked her around the countryside for several hours before finding an abandoned building where he violated her for 12 hours before killing her.
For 12 hours.
Yeah, before killing her. So these girls suffered. He was really torturing them.
Yeah,
He,
definitely.
he wasn't like unaliving them quickly. He was torturing them for many, many hours and then unaliving them after they suffered. This is awful. And I don't understand why he was doing this to girls when he was violated by men as a child, not girls. So I'm not sure why he was taking his anger out on girls. But anyhow,
Mm-hmm.
so the police found the bodies of 53 girls between the ages of 8 to 13.
Yeah.
and several were in the forest near Ambato, near the town of Ambato, while another 28 sites that Lopez pointed out to didn't yield any human remains. Police attributed this to scavenging animals, unearthing and scattering the body parts. Now, they found a mass grave where he estimated 110 murders, where the police thought his 110 murders in Ecuador was legitimate. So the police, they charged him for 110 murders, but he had confessed to 350 murders between the three countries. Now, since the other 240 murders occurred in two other countries, the authorities did not charge him with all 350. They just charged him with 110 that happened in their country of Ecuador.
Right, yeah.
Because they said it was going to cost too much money to hold additional trials in Colombia and Peru. Okay, now this is where it gets really messed up. The legal system is really messed up here. In 1980, his trial began. Okay, so the police have said, yes, he murdered 110 girls here in Ecuador. We're going to try him for 110 murders. Okay, he's guilty of those 110 that he showed them the graves to.
Oh, dear.
Now, the trial began on through Judge Jose Roberto Cabos Moscoso, and he was charged with 57 counts of murder. On January 27, 1981, he was found guilty of 3 of the murders and received a sentence of 16 years, the maximum prison sentence available in Ecuador at the time. So he confessed to over 350 murders, unalivings of little girls between the ages of 9 and 13, yet he only got sentenced to 16 years because that was the maximum prison sentence in Ecuador at the time. So isn't that pretty messed up?
Yeah, that is. That's very messed up.
Okay, so then he served his prison sentence at the Garcia Moreno prison near Quito, where he was frequently attacked by knives, with knives by fellow inmates. So they had to have increased security for him so that he wouldn't be killed by fellow inmates. Because the inmates wanted to kill him because of what he had done to all these unalived, all these little girls. Okay, so throughout the early 1990s, Lopez was often interviewed by journalists and usually made contradictory statements about the unalivings. He bragged about the rush he felt when strangling the victims, but other times he claimed that he was only an accomplice to the actual perpetrator, who was a man named Jorge Patiño. Now, he stated that he only helped Patiño bury the bodies after being violated by Patiño, and that he eventually unalived Patiño with a knife in Duran, a town Duran. So, so he first is claiming he's responsible for 350 plus unalivings of little girls. But then in interviews after he was already in prison, he said, oh no, I was just helping another guy who was unaliving them. I was just helping them bury the bodies. I wasn't doing anything to the bodies. And he was trying to say that this guy named Jorge Patiño was the one who was actually violating the girls and unaliving them.
Right.
So that's, of course, completely fake. Because then why would he claim that he was the one that violated and unalived 350 plus girls if it was someone else? So I guess he was trying to change his story after he was sentenced to 14 years, 16 years in prison. But this is where it gets even more messed up. He was released 2 years early on August 31st, 1994, after only serving 14 years. For good behavior, they released him. Now remember, in this country, he had already admitted, and they found the burials of we have 110 victims.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they did.
And he gets 16 years, which is not nearly enough. And then he gets off 2 years early So you spent 14 years in prison. How is that justice for all these little
14
girls?
years
Yes, that's all he
for
got.
killing 300 children.
Well, 110 in Ecuador. That's what he was charged with. 110. He couldn't be
Right,
charged with the other ones because Colombia had to charge for the other 100 girls, and Peru had to charge for the other girls.
right.
Now, okay, so in an interview shortly before he was released on August 31st, 1994, he described himself as the man of the century and said he was being released for good behavior. Then he
Mm,
was transported outside from Quito, Ecuador.
mm,
Now, while he was there being taken to the vehicle, he was shaking hands with people in the public. They were present at the courthouse, like as if he was a celebrity. He was enjoying the attention. Okay, after the deportation order was read, police seized Lopez and took him to a different vehicle to transport him to the Colombian border. So they drove around 5 hours until nightfall to lose any potential pursuers because the families of his victims had placed many bounties on Lopez's head, the highest being $25,000.
highest being $25,000.
Yeah,
Wow.
so police had to drive around for 5 hours trying to lose anyone that was following them so they wouldn't capture Lopez and murder him and unalive him.
Yeah.
They should have just let the people do what they wanted to do. I mean, these were their children.
Mm, hmm.
They have saved his life now numerous times, and he keeps on unaliving more girls. Why does he deserve to be protected after he tortured all these young little girls and unalived them? That's not justice.
No, it's not. You're right.
Okay, now when he got to Colombia, Lopez was received by the Colombian officials, but since there was no warrant in Colombia against him, police had to temporarily keep him at a hotel in Pasto. Now, while his room was kept under surveillance, the door was left unlocked, though, and Lopez did not attempt to escape because he was afraid of being killed by vigilantes. So he was actually glad, I guess, that he was in the police custody because the police were protecting him from all the bounties on his head.
Yeah.
But after a week of being there in Colombia at the hotel, an arrest warrant was issued from El Espinal, where they based it on the suspicion of over a dozen unalivings, though there hadn't been an official case filed against Lopez yet. But they had believed that he was responsible for more than a dozen unalivings that they had found in that town. So he was transported to the town, but after the van with Lopez inside got to the town, it was ambushed by an angry mob of 2,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
So then Lopez was transported to Bogota, the capital city, for a medical examination until the situation had calmed down in El Espinal. Lopez again pled with doctors, attending doctors, to release him, but he was returned to El Espinal to face the charges.
Yeah.
Okay, where Alba Sanchez now filed a complaint to the town's court over the murder, the unaliving of her daughter, as the state of her body was similar to that of the girls unalived in Ecuador. So Lopez was convicted of the unaliving of Flor Alba Sanchez. However, a physician believed that Lopez had signs of psychosis for which he would need psychological treatment. But the diagnosis was challenged, and Lopez was designated as having unhealthy personality traits rather than a mental
Mm-hmm.
disorder. He was just evil.
Right.
He knew what he was doing. He wasn't crazy. He was just evil.
Yeah.
But they sent him to the psychiatric ward of the prison. And he did not receive medication, but was the perfect patient. He occupied himself with heavy exercise, reading, and watching TV. He kept himself well groomed. But unlike in Ecuador, he was never interviewed by the Colombian press due to a lack of interest. So the Colombian press didn't bother reporting on him or anything because they weren't really interested. But yet he had claimed to have unalived more than 100 girls in Colombia. but he's only tried for one.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so he only spends 4 years in the psychiatric ward of the prison when he's released on bail. So in February 1998, Lopez was declared sane and released on bail. That's equivalent to roughly 70 US dollars. Now, the condition was that he had to periodically report to his authorities and attend appointments with his therapist, but he immediately disappeared. So he was only 50 years old. Hello?
50 years old.
Yes.
Hmm.
When he disappeared on bail. So he was plenty young enough to keep committing crimes. Now, the last sighting of him was September 22nd, 1999, when he visited the National Civil Registry in Bogota to renew his citizenship card. Okay. Now he had
Yeah.
used the identity card of a 60-year-old man named Israel Cessped, so he could bypass the checkpoints and not get
Hmm.
caught and taken back
Yeah.
to prison.
Hmm.
Okay, and then in 2002, the Colombian National Police and Interpol issued warrants for Lopez's arrest over the unaliving a bunch of other victims because they bore similarities to his modus operandi, his MO. But the Interpol warrant was deactivated in 2005 based on a claim by the National Institute of Forensic Medicine that an abandoned corpse had been identified as Lopez, which was accepted by the National Registry. But he remains a fugitive. So, for some reason, the National Institute of Forensic Medicine claimed that there's a corpse that was his body, but it wasn't. He was still a fugitive. He was still alive. And they believe that he is responsible for the unaliving of Andrea Marcela Garcia Buitrago in Colombia in 2012
Hmm.
because of the similarities with his unaliving of Flor Alba Sanchez, the girl he was charged with in Colombia. Yes, he claimed
Right.
to have unalived more than 100 little
Yeah.
girls in Colombia.
Yeah.
So, but so they believe that is 2012. Remember, he was released in 1998. So he was still unaliving girls and violating them. They at least until 2012. They believe. Okay.
Mm.
Police in Ecuador searched almost every province in Ecuador where they recovered tons of remains of little girls in Ambato, Santo Domingo, and villages like La Troncal, Tucán, Quito, Azogues, Manta, Salcedo. So
Hmm.
he was going to all the provinces, which are in Latin America, we call, like the US calls like states, we call provinces in Latin
Yeah.
American countries. So like in the US, it would be 50 provinces instead of 50 states. So down there, in every province, that's like someone in the US going and killing a bunch of little girls in every single state.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
That's the
Right.
equivalent of that.
Hmm.
Now, there's a long list here of the names of the children that he was tried for. Now, get this. There's no known records about how many victims he unalived in Peru. Peru never charged him with anything because he disappeared in Colombia when he was out on bail. And the
Hmm.
Peruvians weren't asking for his
Yeah.
deportation to Peru.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they didn't care. Because remember, they told him before, oh, just leave our country, don't come back.
Yes. That's
When
right.
he
Yeah.
tried to kidnap the other girl.
Yeah.
So they knew what he was doing and they just did not care probably because the girls were homeless children and indigenous children.
Hmm.
So now, had they been the children of wealthy people in the city, I guarantee you, he would have been spending life in prison.
Mm.
Okay, so yes, he only spent 14 years in Ecuadorian prison, 4 years in a psych ward in Colombia, and then disappeared while he was on bail. So he basically only spent 18 years, and
Mm-hmm.
4 of them were in the psych ward watching TV, exercising, playing games. So really, it was just 14 years in the prison
Yeah.
for 300 plus, 350 plus murder, unalivings of little girls between the ages of 9 and 13. Do you have any questions?
Mm.
Does anyone have any
How he
questions?
how he managed to get away with it for that long with that many.
And the police kept letting him go. When people
Yeah.
told the police, hey, he tried kidnapping one of these girls here, he tried abducting my daughter, they would let him go. They take him and let him go. They let him go.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's like, why would they do that? If there's so many children, so many little girls between the ages of 9 and 13 missing in those areas, the police knew that, okay? There's tons of them
Yep.
missing, over 100 missing. And this guy is trying to abduct a little 9-year-old and a 12-year-old. It's like, hello? And they're trying to say, oh, well, it's human traffickers that probably took these girls. No, it's like
That's
it's right
understandable.
there. He was known for unaliving girls between the ages of 9 and 13. Those were all the girls that were missing.
Mm-hmm.
It's obvious it was him.
Mm.
I mean, he admitted to it, but yet they thought he was making it up. How ridiculous is that? So, anyways, now I want to go over real quick before we end this, to honor some of the poor victims
Mm-hmm.
of Pedro Lopez. And remember his name, Pedro Lopez. It's a very common, popular name in Latin America and Spanish countries.
Yep.
But this is Pedro Alonso Lopez, the monster of the Andes.
Mm-hmm.
So he was born October 5th, 1948, and disappeared September 22nd, 1999. He could still be alive. He would be 77 years old right now, turning 78 this year.
That's a worrying thought.
Hmm. Yeah, they know, they're 99% sure that he was committing these crimes up until 2012.
Right.
Okay, so now, do you feel sorry for him or do you feel bad for him because of what he went through as a child? I mean, that contributed to him being mentally messed up, but that doesn't mean just because someone did something wrong to you as a child that you go and do it to other people.
I suppose in a way I can because I've been through that kind of thing myself, but I haven't turned into a blooming serial killer because of it. So no, no, I don't have sympathy for him.
Yeah, no. There's no reason for him to have done something like that.
Yeah,
Now,
there's no reason for him to
okay,
analyze them,
now it
especially
shows,
kids. I mean, that's just
yeah, little
that is
girls between the
so
ages 9 and
warped.
13. It's it's
That is so
awful.
warped, and also to make them like living dolls. Well, not
Oh yeah,
actually
and have
living, but
tea
you get what I
parties
mean.
with them.
And to do things like that, I mean, you
Like dig
know,
them
that
up and pull them out of their graves that he put them in to play tea party with them.
hmm yeah.
Which he was probably doing that because he didn't have a childhood. He was homeless since he was 8 years old, and
Well,
when
neither
he
did
was
Michael
at
Jackson,
home,
but you don't see him being a serial killer, do you?
no. But there are people that believe he did other stuff. Let's
Mm,
not get into that. That was a bad comparison.
no.
Okay, so now the victims in Ecuador were the ones that he was actually, um, of the bodies that they could identify, because most of the bodies could not be identified because
hmm
they were all bones and they didn't know who the remains belonged to.
Yeah.
So the ones that identified was Hortensia Garcia Lozada, 11 years old. Ivanova Jacome, 9 years old. Maria Celia Huela Vascuri, 10 years old. Maria Medina Jordan, 12 years old. Maria Soledad Arias Otañeda, 10 years old. Rocio de Pilar Rosada Lopez, 11 years old. Mercedes Verónica Infante Díaz, 9 years old. Isabel Cristina Recarde, 11 years old. Hortensia Hada Sanazano, 10 years old. Vilma Margot Punina Chicasta, 12 years old. Leonor Solis Santa Maria, 13 years old. Maria Rosario Morocho Mabanda, 13 years old. Maria de las Mercedes Valencia Ati, 12 years old. Amanda Mireya Naranjo Jerez, 13 years old. Rita Eulelia Paleon, 10 years old. Juana Lucia Chimana Perez, 10 years old. Those are the ones that the bodies that they could identify of all the 110 graves in Ecuador. Those are the only ones that they could identify, and that's only 17. Only 17 bodies were identified.
Right.
I mean, they had the bones to all these other bodies, but they don't know who these girls are because they got them from different towns all over the countryside.
Yeah.
Now, and then the two other ones in Colombia whose bodies were found, Flor Alba Sanchez, she was around 11 or 12, and Blanca Bautista, they say she was like 9 or 12. They don't really know her exact age because I guess the remains were so I guess that's what the coroner's putting her age between 9 and 12.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, this is very sad. I had never heard of this serial killer before, and I feel like more people should know who Pedro Lopez is, the monster of the Andes.
Definitely,
He's
definitely. I
the
mean,
world, the most prolific serial killer in the whole world.
he's
Why aren't
definitely
more
a very
people talking
cautionary
about this?
tale that, people need to be aware of, especially if he's still alive.
Yeah, yeah, because he would be 77 right now if he's still alive. But it seems that the crime stopped in 2012. So I'm thinking he probably died, and that's probably why the crime stopped. 2012 was the last known one.
Yeah. That is
But who
possible.
knows? He could have committed more. They haven't been found. So like the girls in Peru, all those girls had never been found. So yeah. Okay, well, that's it. You guys now know about Pedro Alonso Lopez, the monster of the Andes. And now I'm probably going to have night terrors. But thanks for tuning in. And we will continue the discussion of serial killers in next Wednesday's episode.
Yeah,
There's several interesting ones coming up. So tune in.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the most haunting episodes we've ever done.
Yeah.
Definitely the most disturbing as well.
Well, okay. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you next week.
Thanks very much for joining us. And turn on my phone.
And don't forget to tune in to our show, Gilligan's Island. That airs every Friday night. So tune in to that, and it's live, and it's lots of fun.
It is. Yes, it is.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. And try not to have nightmares.
Yep.